History is filled with stories that will leave you shaken, tales of unimaginable suffering, ruthless cruelty, and shocking ends that push the limits of what we can comprehend. From barbaric torture devices to catastrophic disasters, these chilling accounts reveal the darkest side of human existence. If you think you can handle it, get ready, because we're about to take a deep dive into 1 hour of the worst deaths in human history. A cold morning in 2015 in Murmansk, Russia, near the Arctic Circle. Andrei Golubov, 36, was asleep in his apartment when he needed to use the communal toilet. The shared facility was an old, decaying cesspit, a simple hole covered by rotting wooden boards. Andrei and his neighbors had used it many times despite its poor condition. The weakened wooden cover gave way while squatting over the pit that night. Andrei fell into the cesspit, a deep hole filled with waste, unable to climb out. It was 3 a.m., and Andrei was trapped in an unthinkable situation. Shortly after, Konstantin Polyakov, 30, arrived at the communal toilet. He saw Andrei struggling in the pit and calling for help. Instead of acting immediately, Konstantin assumed Andrei would manage to get out on his own. To avoid further inconveniencing his friend, he relieved himself elsewhere and returned to his apartment without informing anyone or seeking help. He reasoned that Andrei, uninjured and seemingly capable, would eventually escape. However, Andrei's situation grew dire. Hours passed, and the freezing temperatures, unsanitary conditions, and sheer exhaustion overwhelmed him. His voice weakened, and his attempts to climb out failed. By morning, Konstantin had fallen asleep and had not checked on him again. The incident remained unreported. It wasn't until the next day, when other neighbors became concerned, that Konstantin mentioned what had happened. A group rushed to the cesspit, only to find Andrei lifeless. He had succumbed to exhaustion and exposure after more than 12 hours trapped in the pit. Authorities later confirmed that he had been unable to keep himself afloat and ultimately drowned. With its crumbling and unsanitary structure, the communal cesspit had been neglected for years. Neighbors, including Yuri Blokin, 60, expressed frustration with the living conditions. "We have no private toilets and no one maintains this one. It's dangerous, but we have no choice but to use it," Yuri explained. The tragedy highlighted the risks posed by such neglect. Konstantin's actions, or lack thereof, were scrutinized. He admitted he did not have emergency services contact information but believed Andrei would escape alone. While the authorities deemed the incident an accident, Andrei's family and neighbors questioned whether prompt action could have saved his life. They believed a simple call for help might have made all the difference. The tragic death raised questions about accountability. What if someone had maintained the cesspit? What if Konstantin had acted sooner or alerted others? Small decisions, choosing to act or ignoring a problem, can have significant consequences. Andrei's death underscored the devastating impact of neglect and indifference, both in infrastructure and human actions. On March 24, 1944, in Alkaloo, South Carolina, 14-year-old George Stinney Jr., an African-American boy, was playing outside with his younger sister, Amy. The siblings were approached by two white girls, 11-year-old Betty June Binnicker and 7-year-old Mary Emma Thames. The girls were looking for wildflowers and asked George and Amy for help. The siblings didn't know where to find them, so the girls moved on. That evening, Betty and Mary didn't return home, prompting a community-wide search. George and his family joined the effort, with George mentioning he had seen the girls earlier that day. The following morning, the girls' bodies were discovered in a shallow ditch, having suffered violent injuries. Soon after, George was accused of being responsible for their deaths. The local sheriff claimed that George confessed to the crime during questioning, allegedly admitting to using a blunt object and expressing inappropriate intentions toward one of the girls. However, this confession was neither written nor formally recorded. There were no witnesses or physical evidence connecting George to the incident, yet he was quickly arrested as the primary suspect. George's arrest set in motion one of the most troubling examples of injustice in the history of the United States. At 14 years old, George was small and frail, standing 5 feet 1 inch and weighing only 95 pounds. He was questioned alone for hours without a parent or lawyer present. The police reported a confession, but it was unclear if it was given voluntarily or under pressure. George's trial began less than a month later on April 24, 1944. It lasted only 3 hours. His court-appointed attorney, a tax lawyer with no criminal experience, offered no defense. There was no investigation into George's alibi, no challenge to the lack of evidence, and no witnesses called to support him. The all-white jury deliberated for just 10 minutes before finding him guilty. George was sentenced to death. The trial's atmosphere was hostile, with African Americans barred from the courtroom, which was packed with an all-white audience. The legal system failed George at every step. His family was forced to flee town due to threats, leaving George alone and defenseless. On June 16, 1944, less than 2 months after his conviction, George was executed by electric chair. At 14, he was the youngest person in the modern history of the United States to face such a punishment. The chair, built for adults, was far too large for his small frame. Officers placed a Bible under him to raise him. Straps meant to secure him hung loose, and the face mask was too big. Witnesses described the scene as horrifying, with the mask slipping off during the execution, revealing the terrified face of a child. George's death devastated his family, who lived with the pain and fear caused by threats and discrimination. For decades, his case was largely ignored, but his family and supporters never gave up hope of clearing his name. In 2004, renewed legal efforts began to seek justice for George. Civil rights activists argued he had been denied a fair trial and that his constitutional rights were violated. In December 2014, a South Carolina Circuit Court judge vacated George's conviction, ruling that his trial had been a failure of justice. The judge cited the lack of legal representation, the absence of an investigation, and a coerced confession as reasons for overturning the verdict. This ruling brought some closure to George's family, who had fought tirelessly to clear his name. George's sister, Katherine Robinson, viewed the decision as a bittersweet victory, feeling both relief at the long-awaited acknowledgement and sorrow as she thought of the helplessness George faced at the time. George Stinney Jr.'s story reveals the deep injustices of the legal system in the segregated South. His case is an example of the harm caused by racial prejudice and a failure to uphold justice. Though his name has been cleared, the tragedy of his short life and wrongful death lingers as a call to ensure fairness for all, especially for those who cannot defend themselves. It was the night of September 18, 2015 in Katni, a small town in Madhya Pradesh, India. Latori Barman, a 45-year-old farm laborer, attended a village fair. After the event, his wife left to visit her parents while Latori decided to head home alone. He had been drinking, and the road he took was poorly maintained. The path had a large, unmarked pothole, no warnings, barriers, or lights to indicate danger. It was pitch dark, and Latori, unaware of the hazard, stumbled into the deep hole, lost his balance, and fell. In his intoxicated state, he lost consciousness. That same night, a team of road workers arrived to repair the damaged section. Their task was to fill the pothole with a mixture of gravel and asphalt, and then flatten it with a steamroller. Unknowingly, they began working without noticing Latori lying at the bottom of the hole. They poured hot tar over him and completed the job, leaving him buried beneath the newly paved road. The following morning, villagers from Sleemanabad made a disturbing discovery. As one local walked along the freshly laid road, they noticed something unusual. Part of an arm was sticking out from the asphalt. Upon closer inspection, the horrifying truth emerged. Latori's body was buried beneath the road. Authorities were called, and an investigation began. Latori had tragically passed away due to suffocation under the layers of hot tar. The police concluded that he had fallen into the pothole the previous night while intoxicated. The road workers, unaware of his presence, unknowingly sealed him under the fresh asphalt. The tragedy sparked outrage in the local community. Villagers protested, blocking roads and demanding accountability. The workers involved, including the truck driver who transported the asphalt and the individual who filled the pothole, were arrested and charged with negligence leading to a loss of life. This incident showed a much larger problem in India: the dangerous state of its roads. Poor maintenance, lack of safety measures, and hazardous infrastructure contribute to thousands of accidents annually. In rural areas and even major cities, potholes often turn into death traps, especially during the monsoon season. According to statistics, around 7,700 people lose their lives each year in India due to road-related hazards. The term killer craters has been used to describe these deadly potholes. In some areas, residents name these hazards after public officials to draw attention to the issue. Latori's case became one of the many tragedies linked to inadequate infrastructure, sparking public calls for better road safety measures and stricter oversight of construction projects. As a response, local authorities offered Latori's family a compensation of 50,000 rupees, or about $760, While the payment was intended to alleviate some of the financial strain on his widow and children, many felt it was an insufficient gesture considering the gravity of the incident. The tragedy also raised critical questions. How did the workers fail to notice Latore in the pothole? Why were there no safety measures, such as barriers or warning signs to prevent accidents like this? And why did it take a villager noticing his arm the next day for the truth to come to light? Latore's death, though shocking, was not an isolated incident. India's roads claim thousands of lives annually, with poorly maintained roads playing a significant role. These accidents often go unnoticed until they result in devastating consequences. Latore's story is an example of the dangers posed by neglect and lack of oversight. Improving infrastructure is key to preventing such tragedies. Roads need proper construction, regular maintenance, and safety measures like visible signage and protective barriers. However, challenges such as corruption and poor accountability in India's public works system hinder meaningful progress. Latore Barman's untimely passing is a warning about the cost of neglecting road safety. While the workers involved were charged, the real tragedy lies in how preventable his death could have been if basic precautions had been in place. His story underscores the urgent need for reform in road safety and infrastructure management in India. On October 13, 2011, in Foshan, a bustling city in southern China, a tragic incident unfolded that would spark global outrage and push an entire nation to question its values. Wang Yue, a 2-year-old girl affectionately called Yue, was walking near a busy market street when she wandered onto the road. What happened next shocked the world. As Yue toddled along, a white van struck her and continued driving without stopping. Moments later, a second vehicle, a blue van, ran over the injured child. Yue was left on the street, gravely hurt and unable to move. Over a dozen passers-by walked or cycled past her for the next 10 minutes, some glancing briefly, others not seeming to notice her. Not one of them stopped to help. Security cameras captured the heartbreaking footage, which showed Yue lying in distress as people carried on with their day. Finally, an older woman approached her, trying to move the child to safety. Unable to carry Yue alone, the woman left to seek further assistance. Eventually, Chen Xianmei, a scrap picker, intervened and carried Yue off the street. The little girl was rushed to the hospital, but her injuries were too severe. On October 21st, 8 days after the incident, Yue passed away from brain and organ failure. The video of the incident spread quickly, drawing reactions of anger, sadness, and disbelief worldwide. Many struggled to understand how a child could be left so helpless and ignored by so many. The footage exposed the tragedy and a deeper societal issue, a growing indifference in a rapidly developing nation. Public outrage was swift. Social media in China, especially platforms like Sina Weibo, was flooded with posts expressing shock and grief. The incident led to heated debates about morality and compassion in modern society. Many blamed urbanization and economic growth for fostering isolation and self-interest. Others pointed to the legal system, which discouraged people from offering help out of fear of being held legally or financially responsible. China has seen cases where individuals were accused or sued after trying to assist someone in need. These incidents created a culture of hesitation, where people often avoided involvement, even in life-threatening situations. In Yue's case, many bystanders appeared too afraid to act, worried about potential consequences. The tragedy highlighted a deeper rift between material success and traditional values like empathy and community responsibility in Chinese society. Some commentators argued that the focus on economic growth had eroded the moral fabric of society. A widely shared question from a professor of religion, Li Xiangping, summed up the national sentiment. What led to this tragedy? Our laws, our wealth, or our indifference? Government officials also addressed the incident. Wang Yang, then the Communist Party chief of Guangdong province, called for reflection on the country's moral compass. There were also calls for legal reforms, including introducing a Good Samaritan law to protect those who assist others in emergencies. While such reforms were discussed, many felt uncertain about how they would work. In the aftermath, donations poured in to cover Yue's medical expenses and to support Chen Xianmei for her act of compassion. While many praised her, some doubted her motives, reflecting a society where trust and goodwill had grown fragile. Yue's death symbolized the moral challenges facing modern China. Her story continues to resonate as people grapple with rebuilding a sense of compassion and social responsibility. The incident forced difficult questions. What if someone had acted sooner? Could legal protections have encouraged bystanders to step in? While the answers remain unclear, Yue's story has left an undeniable mark on public consciousness. It calls for re-evaluating how society values human connection amid rapid progress, ensuring that such a tragedy does not repeat itself. 16th, 2003, at the Island County Fair on Whidbey Island, Washington. The fair was lively, with families enjoying the warm summer afternoon, the smell of popcorn and cotton candy filling the air. Children eagerly lined up for rides, and one of the highlights was the Super Loop 2, a small roller coaster with a single vertical loop. Operated by Paradise Amusements, a family-run business, this ride had been a fair favorite for 3 years. Doug McKay, a 40-year-old co-owner of Paradise Amusements, was working on maintaining the rides that day. Doug and his wife, Sherry, had been running their carnival business for years. Doug had grown up in the industry, starting as a child selling popcorn, and eventually becoming responsible for managing and maintaining rides. His experience and dedication to the family business were well known. That afternoon, Doug noticed the Super Loop 2 needed lubrication on part of its track. Maintenance like this was routine, but what happened next was not. Doug decided to address the issue while the ride was still operating, with passengers on board. Confident in his expertise, he climbed onto the platform of the ride to perform the task. Unfortunately, this decision turned tragic. While applying lubricant, Doug lost his footing and slipped. His long hair became entangled in one of the moving passenger carts. The cart, traveling at high speed, pulled Doug into the air, dragging him along the ride's track. Witnesses reported seeing him being lifted as high as 40 feet, colliding with parts of the ride before being thrown to the ground. Doug's body struck a metal fence, and he did not survive the fall. The horrifying accident unfolded in front of numerous fairgoers, including children riding the Super Loop 2 at the time. Many of them witnessed the tragic event up close, leaving them deeply shaken. Some children were even covered in blood during the incident, a traumatic experience for all involved. Parents rushed to comfort their kids, and some, like Rob Volz, whose 12-year-old son Dylan was on the ride, took their children home to clean them up before they could be questioned by police. Law enforcement interviewed the children who were on the ride, but the process frustrated some parents. They felt it was insensitive to question the young witnesses before allowing them to recover from the ordeal. Meanwhile, the fairgrounds, initially silent after the incident, resumed activities within an hour. However, the Super Loop 2 was immediately shut down and never operated again. Despite the tragedy, Sherry McKay honored a promise she had made to Doug, to keep their business running. The next day, all other rides resumed operations, except for the Super Loop 2. The carnival continued, but the loss of Doug was deeply felt by his family and crew. He was remembered as a tough but caring mentor who had dedicated his life to the carnival industry. Details of Doug's accident were devastating. Authorities speculated that his long hair or another part of his body became entangled in the ride. Witness accounts varied, with some reporting his arm or hair being caught. Doug sustained severe injuries from the initial impact of the ride and further trauma from the fall. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but he had already passed away. The state authorities did not pursue charges or safety regulation changes following the incident. Since Doug was a business owner and not an employee, the case fell outside their jurisdiction. Despite the lack of formal consequences, the accident showed the risks involved in operating and maintaining carnival rides. Doug McKay left behind his wife, Sherry, and their 3 children, Travis, Michelle, and Kelsey. His loss profoundly impacted his family, friends, and colleagues. Doug's funeral was held on August 26, 2003, at Calvary Chapel, Lake City in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Loved ones gathered to honor the memory of a man who had devoted his life to his family and the carnival business. Doug's tragic death remains a reminder of how critical safety precautions are in high-risk work environments, even for seasoned professionals. His passing left a void in the industry and among those who knew and admired him. July 26, 2010, in California, when 80-year-old Maria de Jesus Arroyo suffered a heart-related incident at home. Emergency responders rushed her to White Memorial Hospital in Los Angeles, where doctors tried to revive her but ultimately declared her dead. Her passing was attributed to cardiac arrest. Following standard procedure, hospital staff placed her body in the morgue freezer, unaware that this decision would lead to a horrifying tragedy. Maria was a beloved mother of 8, grandmother, and wife of 63 years. Her family, who had just celebrated her 80th birthday, believed she had passed peacefully. They began funeral arrangements without suspicion. However, when the morticians received her body days later, they made a shocking discovery. Maria's body was found face down in the bag, her face bruised, cut, and disfigured with a broken nose. These injuries were too severe to have occurred post-mortem or during routine handling. Devastated, the family initially assumed mishandling by hospital staff. They filed a lawsuit accusing the hospital of negligence. But as experts examined the case, a much more disturbing explanation came to light. A pathologist, Dr. William Lewis Manion, reviewed Maria's injuries and concluded that she had likely been alive when placed in the freezer. His analysis suggested that the cold temperatures caused her to regain consciousness. Disoriented and trapped in darkness, Maria might have struggled to free herself, causing the injuries on her face. Tragically, the freezing conditions ultimately led to her death. Dr. Manion's findings described an unthinkable scenario. He concluded that Maria had been improperly placed in the freezer while still alive, face up instead of face down. This position, combined with her attempts to escape, resulted in severe injuries. The disfigurement, including bruises and cuts, indicated a desperate struggle, not damage that could occur after death. The hospital denied these claims, insisting they followed correct procedures and disputing the pathologist's conclusions. They argued there was no proof Maria had been alive when sent to the morgue. The family, now accusing the hospital of medical malpractice, filed another lawsuit in December 2011. Their lawyer, Scott Schutzman, called the case one of the most extreme examples of negligence. Schutzman remarked that it was every family's nightmare. He wondered aloud if anyone could imagine waking up in a sealed body bag, unable to escape. The legal process was fraught with obstacles. Initially, the case was dismissed due to the statute of limitations, as the family had waited more than a year to file. However, the Second District Court of Appeal overturned this ruling, stating the family could not have known the truth until receiving the pathologist report. The lawsuit was allowed to proceed, offering the family a chance to seek justice. Court records highlighted troubling inconsistencies in the hospital's actions. Reports suggested Maria's vital signs might not have been thoroughly checked before declaring her dead. EKG records showed potential signs of life, raising questions about whether the hospital had rushed its decision. These findings pointed to procedural failures with devastating consequences. For Maria's family, the ordeal was emotionally unbearable. They struggled to reconcile the horrifying details of her final moments with the loving memories they had of her. The idea that she woke up alone, cold, and fighting for her life was a haunting image they could not escape. The case brought attention to serious flaws in medical protocols. It underscored the dire need for thorough confirmation of death to avoid preventable tragedies. As the lawsuit unfolded, the Arroyo family remained determined to hold the hospital accountable, despite the hospital's continued denials and defense of its actions. This tragedy left lingering questions. What if Maria's vital signs had been rechecked? Could her life have been saved? And how did such an unimaginable mistake occur? For her family, the pursuit of answers and justice was their only comfort, though no legal outcome could erase the pain of what Maria endured in her final hours. It was December 13, 2017, in Glen Allen, Virginia. Bethany Lynn Stevens, a 22-year-old dog enthusiast, set out for a walk with her two pit bulls, Tonka and Pac-Man, near her father's home in Goochland County. Walking her dogs was a daily routine for Bethany, who was experienced in caring for them. But that evening, she didn't return. The next day, Bethany's body was discovered in the woods in a horrifying state. Bethany's father grew concerned when she didn't come back from her walk. At 8:20 p.m., he reported her missing to the sheriff's office. Authorities quickly began a search, focusing on where she usually walked her dogs. What they found was shocking. Deputies located her body in a remote field guarded by Tonka and Pac-Man. One of the dogs, Pac-Man, was reportedly seen behaving aggressively near the body. The scene was disturbing. It took officers nearly 90 minutes to secure the dog so they could examine Bethany's remains. The injuries were severe. Her body had significant wounds, particularly on her face, throat, and torso, with clear signs of a struggle. Defensive wounds on her hands and arms indicated that Bethany had fought to protect herself during the attack. Investigators determined that the initial injuries likely caused her to lose consciousness, after which the attack continued. Nearby, Bethany's broken phone, covered in bite marks, further suggested the dog's involvement. The autopsy confirmed that injuries from an animal attack caused her death. Toxicology tests revealed no drugs or alcohol in her system, ruling out any incapacitation before the attack. As news of the tragedy spread, it drew national attention and sparked debate. Friends and family, who had known the dog since they were puppies, found it hard to believe that Tonka and Pac-Man could turn on Bethany. She had raised them with care and even allowed them to sleep in her bed. Many questioned how two beloved pets could suddenly become so aggressive. Several theories emerged. Some suggested Bethany might have been attacked by a wild animal or harmed by another person. However, Goochland County Sheriff James Agnew ruled out foul play, confirming there were no signs of strangulation or other external causes of death. The dogs were identified as the only attackers. Experts began examining potential reasons for the dogs' behavior. In the months before the tragedy, their living conditions had changed. Bethany had moved out, leaving Tonka and Pac-Man in her father's care. The previously indoor dogs were now kept in an outdoor kennel. This sudden lifestyle change, combined with reduced attention and possible underfeeding, may have caused them stress and aggression. Dog trainer Valerie Paul explained that such changes could alter an animal's behavior. Dogs can perceive their environment and interactions differently, especially under stress. These factors might have led to the tragic incident despite Bethany's bond with her dogs. On the day of the attack, Bethany likely took the dogs for their usual walk, unaware of the potential danger. Something during the walk may have triggered their aggression, leading to the attack. Experts believe the dog's actions were driven by instinct, not malice, possibly due to stress or hunger. The case raised broader concerns about pet owners' responsibilities and the risks of owning large, powerful animals. While some blamed the breed, experts emphasized that the situation was more complex. Tonka and Pac-Man's behavior was likely influenced by their environment, care, and stress levels rather than the inherent aggression linked to their breed. In the wake of the tragedy, Bethany's family, along with authorities, decided to euthanize the dogs, believing they posed a danger to others. This decision further fueled public debate about animal behavior and safety. Bethany's death leaves many unanswered questions. Could changes in the dog's care have prevented the tragedy? Were there warning signs that went unnoticed? And could this have been avoided with earlier intervention? While experts continue to analyze the factors leading to the attack, the loss of Bethany Lynn Stevens remains a heartbreaking reminder of the complexities of human-animal relationships. It was March 19, 2015, in Kabul, Afghanistan. Farkhunda Malikzada, a 27-year-old woman, left her home to attend a Quran reciting class. She was a volunteer teacher and a student of Islamic law, aspiring to become a judge. That morning, she assured her mother, Bibi Hajera, that she would help prepare for Afghan New Year celebrations upon her return. But Farkhunda never made it back. On her way home, she stopped at the Shado Shamshira Mosque, where a heated argument unfolded between her and Zainuddin, the shrine's caretaker. Farkhunda opposed the sale of amulets, viewing them as superstitious and against Islamic teachings. Frustrated by the disagreement, Zainuddin falsely accused her of disrespecting the Quran. His loud accusation quickly drew attention and a crowd gathered, fueled by outrage. Farkhunda vehemently denied the claim, repeatedly asserting her faith as a Muslim and her respect for the Quran. Despite her protests, the mob refused to listen. The false accusation spread rapidly, fueling the crowd's escalating anger. The situation escalated and the crowd became violent. Farkhunda was dragged out of the mosque and attacked with sticks and stones. Police arrived but did little to intervene. Instead of protecting her, they fired warning shots into the air and struggled to control the enraged mob. At one point, officers moved Farkhunda to the mosque roof, likely to shield her, but the mob hurled objects at her from below. Struck and weakened, she fell back into the crowd, where the violence intensified. The mob dragged Farkhunda into the street, where she was beaten severely. A car ran over her body, dragging her along the road. Her attackers then pulled her to the Kabul River, where they continued the brutal assault. Finally, they set her body on fire, with some members of the crowd using their clothing to feed the flames when her body resisted burning. The horrific event was captured on cell phones and shared online, sparking widespread outrage in Afghanistan and internationally. The footage revealed a horrifying reality. The attack was not carried out by extremists, but by everyday citizens driven by false accusations and a lack of understanding. President Ashraf Ghani condemned the act as heinous, and investigations were launched. Kabul's chief criminal investigator, General Mohammad Zahir, confirmed that no evidence existed to support the claim against Farkhunda. She had been falsely accused. Despite initial statements from some religious leaders defending the mob's actions, the truth eventually came to light. Farkhunda was innocent. The attack was a result of misinformation, societal misogyny, and mob violence. The brutality of Farkhunda's death became a turning point. Thousands of Afghans took to the streets in protest, uniting under the shared declaration that they stood with Farkhunda. Women's rights activists painted their faces red to symbolize her bloodied image. Her funeral was a historic moment as women carried her coffin, a powerful statement in a society where such roles are typically reserved for men. Justice, however, proved elusive. Of the 49 individuals initially charged, 4 were sentenced to death, and others received lengthy prison terms. Yet appeals reduced many sentences, and several defendants were released on bail. This leniency angered activists and Farkhunda's family, who felt justice had not been served. Farkhunda's death became a rallying cry for women's rights in Afghanistan. The street where she was killed was renamed in her honor, and her grave became a site of remembrance. Her story sheds light on the dangers women face in societies where deeply ingrained biases and misinformation can lead to such tragedies. For her mother, Bibi Hajera, the grief was unbearable. She remembered identifying her daughter's body, burned and battered. Despite her pain, she stood strong, participating in the historic funeral procession alongside other women. While Farkhunda's death exposed the harsh realities faced by Afghan women, it also ignited conversations about change. Her name remains a symbol of resilience and the fight against injustice, reminding the world of the work still needed to protect women's rights and challenge societal norms. 2015, on a regular Sunday in Jingzhou, a busy city in China's Hubei province, families were out shopping, and the Anliang department store was bustling with weekend crowds. For 30-year-old Xiang Liujuan and her 2-year-old son, it started as a typical outing, but ended in an unimaginable tragedy that shook the nation. Xiang and her son were nearing the top of an escalator when disaster struck. The metal floor panel beneath their feet suddenly gave way, exposing the machinery below. In a desperate act, Xiang pushed her son forward, saving his life as the floor collapsed. A nearby mall worker pulled the boy to safety, but Xiang was pulled into the escalator's mechanism. Despite efforts to save her, she was unable to escape. CCTV footage captured the harrowing moments. Xiang was seen holding her son, struggling to push him away from the danger as the floor crumbled. In those final seconds, she disappeared into the machinery, while a mall employee tried to grab her hand, but it was too late. Her husband, Zhang Wei, was shopping on another floor and witnessed the incident, helpless to intervene. What made this tragedy even harder to bear was that it could have been prevented. Just minutes before the collapse, mall staff noticed the loose metal panel. 2 employees found screws missing, leaving the plate unstable. Yet no action was taken to shut down the escalator or warn shoppers. There were no signs, barriers, or immediate safety measures. The head of the local safety administration later revealed that maintenance work had been done on the escalator earlier that day. However, the workers had failed to secure the panel properly. This oversight led to the fatal accident. Witnesses said the mall employees tried to warn Xiang as she approached the top, but by then it was too late. The escalator kept running, and within moments the catastrophe unfolded. Emergency responders worked for 4 hours to recover Xiang's body from the machinery. By the time they succeeded, there were no signs of life. News of the incident quickly spread across Chinese social media, with millions reacting to the heartbreaking story. Many praised Xiang's heroic actions in saving her son, while others expressed outrage at the negligence that allowed the tragedy to happen. Questions arose about why the escalator wasn't shut down immediately after the loose screws were discovered. The employees, it was revealed, lacked training in handling such emergencies. Experts also criticized the design of the escalator. Charles Wong Kai-han, a safety expert, explained that relying on screws to secure panels was unsafe and prone to failure. He noted that the cover should have been designed to remain stable under stress. But design flaws weren't the only issue. The larger problem was the lack of accountability and immediate action by the mall. The department store remained silent, refusing to release a statement or take responsibility. Investigations were ongoing, but the public's frustration continued to grow. Many saw this as part of a broader issue with safety standards in public spaces. This incident is not unique. In recent years, several similar escalator-related tragedies have occurred in China, highlighting systemic problems with maintenance and safety enforcement. In 2012, a young boy lost his life in a similar accident at a Beijing department store. Months earlier, a subway escalator malfunction in Beijing claimed another life. These repeated tragedies reveal ongoing lapses in safety protocols. Following Xiang's death, local authorities suspended the use of escalators made by Shenlong Elevator Limited, the manufacturer of the faulty machine. Inspectors were sent to check all escalators and elevators in the region to prevent further accidents. However, for Xiang's family, these actions came too late. They were left grieving a mother, wife, and daughter whose life was cut short. Xiang's family had refrained from discussing compensation until the investigation concluded. They wanted accountability for the preventable errors that led to her death. For now, they focus on honoring her memory, especially her last act of courage in saving her son. This tragedy is a grim reminder of the importance of safety in public spaces. It raises difficult questions. What if the staff had acted sooner? Could Xiang have been saved if the escalator was stopped or shoppers were warned in time? And how many more accidents are waiting to happen due to negligence and poor infrastructure? Xiang Liujuan's story is a heartbreaking example of heroism and the devastating consequences of preventable mistakes. It underscores the urgent need for better safety measures, proper training, and stricter accountability to ensure such tragedies never happen again. It was November 5, 1983. Aboard the Biford Dolphin oil rig in the North Sea off Norway, a routine task turned into a devastating tragedy, marking one of the deadliest incidents in offshore oil history. The Biford Dolphin was a semi-submersible rig known for saturation diving, an intense deep-sea operation. Saturation divers work at great depth, staying in pressurized chambers to avoid lengthy decompression after each dive. They live in these chambers for weeks, which enables longer work periods, but involves serious risks. 4 divers and 1 tender were involved in a routine operation on this day. The diving bell, a pressurized vessel transporting divers to and from their underwater workstations, had just brought 2 divers back to the rig. 2 others were already in the pressurized living quarters. The chambers and the diving bell were connected by a trunk, a passage allowing movement between them. The tender, William Crammond, was to disconnect the diving bell after sealing the chamber doors. However, an error occurred. The clamp securing the bell was released before the doors were fully sealed, causing a catastrophic pressure differential. The chambers were pressurized to 9 atmospheres, far greater than normal air pressure. The pressurized air within the chambers escaped violently when the clamp was released. This rapid decompression had devastating effects. 3 divers closest to the chamber entrance, Edwin Arthur Coward, Roy P. Lucas, and Bjorn Gaver Bergerson, died instantly. The rapid pressure change caused the gases in their bloodstreams to expand uncontrollably, severely damaging their internal organs and blood vessels. The 4th diver, Truls Hellevik, suffered the most horrific fate. Standing near the partially open chamber door, he was forcibly pulled through a small opening less than 2 feet wide. The immense pressure difference caused his body to disintegrate. His remains were scattered across the deck with some internal organs expelled intact. The diving bell, no longer secured, was propelled into the air by the explosive force of the decompression. It struck Crammond, causing fatal injuries. His colleague, Martin Saunders, survived but sustained severe injuries. Initially, Crammond was blamed for prematurely releasing the clamp. However, further investigation revealed a fault in the interlock mechanism, a crucial safety feature that prevents accidental detachment. This equipment failure allowed the catastrophic event to unfold. The tragedy left families shattered. Crammond's wife, Ruth, strongly contested the initial findings, defending her husband's professionalism. Despite his extensive experience, the faulty interlock caused an error for which he was unfairly blamed. For decades, Ruth faced the anguish of her husband being held responsible. Compensation for the victims' families was delayed for years. It wasn't until 2009, 26 years later, that the Norwegian government acknowledged its responsibility and awarded compensation. By then, the emotional scars were deeply embedded. The Biford Dolphin disaster forced significant changes in the diving industry. The catastrophic failure prompted new safety regulations, including mandatory installation of reliable interlock systems and redundancies to prevent similar accidents. Companies were also required to implement stricter safety protocols and risk assessments. Though these measures have improved safety, saturation diving remains one of the riskiest professions. Divers endure long periods in confined, pressurized spaces, facing physical and mental challenges. The lessons from the Biford Dolphin tragedy have undoubtedly saved lives, but the haunting questions remain. Could this disaster have been avoided? Would these men have returned home if the equipment had been faultless? The Biford Dolphin accident is an example of the dangers in high-risk industries. It underscores the importance of stringent safety standards and the devastating impact of system failure. September 30th, 1999, in Tokaimura, Japan, a small town about 70 miles northeast of Tokyo. On this day, Workers at a uranium processing facility were performing routine tasks. Unbeknownst to them, a series of errors would result in one of the most devastating nuclear accidents in modern history. The facility, operated by Japan Nuclear Fuel Conversion Company, or JCO, processed uranium for nuclear reactors. That day, 3 workers, Hisashi Uchi, Masato Shinohara, and Yutaka Yokokawa, were preparing uranium-enriched fuel to meet a shipping deadline. To save time, they bypassed standard safety procedures, unknowingly setting off a chain of events that would forever change their lives. Instead of following strict safety guidelines, the workers transferred uranium using stainless steel buckets into a precipitation tank not designed for this purpose. The tank had a safety limit of 2.4 kilograms of uranium, but they poured in 16.6 kilograms, an amount far exceeding the limit. This triggered a critical incident, an uncontrolled nuclear chain reaction, resulting in the release of deadly radiation. At around 10:30 a.m., a blue-white flash of light appeared, a visible sign of the chain reaction. Radiation flooded the room, exposing the workers to lethal doses. Uchi, the closest to the tank, absorbed 17 sieverts of radiation, more than double the amount typically fatal. Shinohara received 10 sieverts, and Yokokawa, who was farther away, was exposed to 3 sieverts. For context, exposure to just 4 to 5 sieverts is usually fatal. The immediate effects were devastating. The workers became nauseous, disoriented, and suffered severe pain. Uchi began vomiting uncontrollably. Their bodies had already started to break down due to the radiation's destructive effects on cells. Emergency alarms blared and the plant was evacuated. Local authorities quickly began efforts to contain the crisis, and the 3 workers were rushed to a hospital in Tokyo. Despite medical intervention, the damage was irreversible. Uchi's suffering was particularly harrowing. The radiation destroyed his immune system and caused his skin to deteriorate severely. His organs began to fail, and his white blood cell count dropped to nearly 0, leaving him vulnerable to infections. Despite his pleas, doctors continued resuscitating him whenever his heart stopped, as his family insisted on ongoing treatment. After enduring 83 days of unimaginable pain, Uchi passed away on December 21, 1999, from multiple organ failure. Shinohara, though less exposed, also succumbed to the effects of radiation after months of treatment. He died on April 27, 2000. Yokokawa, who had received a lower dose, survived after months of hospitalization but faced long-term health issues. The incident didn't just affect the workers. Over 10,000 people in the surrounding area were tested for radiation exposure, with 667 individuals found to have been exposed above safety limits. Though most were not severely affected, fear of contamination spread among residents, leading to panic and economic repercussions for the local community. The company faced severe legal and financial consequences. Yokokawa and other employees were charged with negligence, and in 2001, Yokokawa pled guilty to professional misconduct. The company was ordered to pay $121 million in compensation and was banned from operating nuclear facilities in Japan. The accident also prompted the Japanese government to strengthen safety regulations for nuclear plants. Classified as a Level 4 event on the International Nuclear Event Scale, the Tokemura disaster exposed critical flaws in the nuclear industry. The plant was permanently closed, and the incident severely damaged public trust in nuclear power. Although reforms were introduced, critics argued they didn't go far enough to prevent future disasters. The Tokemura accident remains one of the most haunting nuclear disasters in history. It highlights the devastating consequences of ignoring safety protocols and the profound impact of radiation exposure on the human body. For Hisashi Uchi, who endured the highest recorded dose of radiation ever, his story is a reminder of the human cost of such tragedies. It was September 3, 2010, in the rural county of Devon, England. Mike Edwards, a former cellist for the legendary 1970s rock band Electric Light Orchestra, or ELO, was driving along the A381 road near Totnes. A beloved figure in the music world, Mike was heading to a concert when an unforeseen event changed everything. A massive hay bale, weighing nearly 600 kilograms, or 1,300 pounds, rolled down a hillside, crashed into his van, and caused his untimely passing. This tragic and rare accident shocked the music community and left many wondering how such a bizarre event could happen. Mike Edwards was born on May 31, 1948 in West London. Music was a constant in his life, inspired by his father, who played the cello as a hobby. Mike's talent led him to the prestigious Royal Academy of Music, where he honed his skills and became a versatile musician, mastering classical, jazz, and eventually rock music. In 1972, Mike joined ELO, a band known for blending classical elements with rock. His cello played a central role in their innovative sound, and his eccentric performances quickly made him a fan favorite. Mike was known for his unconventional antics on stage, such as using fruit as a bow for his cello, or adding pyrotechnics to his performances. These unique displays became part of ELO's identity during its early years. Despite his success with ELO, Mike left the band in 1975 seeking a quieter life. He focused on teaching, performing with local ensembles, and exploring creative music projects. Later, he adopted the name Swami Deva Pramada, reflecting his spiritual journey as a follower of the Indian teacher Osho. Though he stepped away from the spotlight, his contributions to music left a lasting impact. On the day of the accident, Mike was driving through a quiet, agricultural stretch of Devon. Unknown to him, a hay bale had been left near the edge of a sloped field. The bale had been moved the day before by Russell Williams, a contractor working for farmer Brian Burden. Due to equipment issues, Williams couldn't finish the job that day and left the bale in place, assuming it was secure. Tragically, it wasn't. As Mike passed along the road, the hay bale detached and rolled down the steep hill, crashing through a wire fence and hedge before colliding with his van. The impact was devastating and left Mike with no chance of survival. It was a sunny, clear day, making the event all the more shocking. The news of Mike's passing devastated his family, friends, and fans. Investigators quickly examined the incident, focusing on the handling of the hay bale. Both Burden and Williams faced charges related to safety violations, with prosecutors arguing that the accident could have been prevented. However, during the trial, evidence showed that both men had acted responsibly, and the jury found them not guilty. The court concluded that the event was an unfortunate accident, one that could have happened to anyone under similar circumstances. Mike's death was mourned deeply. ELO co-founder Jeff Lynne remembered him as a talented musician and kind person, noting his iconic performances that had left a lasting impression. Fans and colleagues reflected on his legacy, recalling his creativity and contributions to music. In the years following the tragedy, Mike's family and community continued to honor his memory. His students, friends, and fellow musicians spoke of the profound impact he had on their lives, both as a teacher and an artist. Though his life ended abruptly, his passion and talent remained celebrated. Mike Edwards' passing stands as a sad reminder of how unpredictable life can be. From his groundbreaking work with ELO to his dedication to teaching and music, Mike left a mark that will not be forgotten. November 25, 1988, in Saitama, Japan, Junko Furuta, a 17-year-old high school student, was biking home after school when her life took a tragic turn. Junko was known for her friendly personality and hard-working nature. She had dreams of becoming a singer and was saving money for a graduation trip while studying for her exams. But that evening, her routine ride home would change everything. Around 8:30 p.m., Junko was approached by two classmates, Hiroshi Miyano and Shinji Minato. Miyano had a reputation for disruptive behavior, while Minato had ties to criminal activities and gang-related violence. Miyano had taken a romantic interest in Junko, but after she rejected him, he became dangerously obsessed. That night, Miyano orchestrated a plan to trap her. Minato knocked her off her bike and fled, while Miyano pretended to help her. Instead of escorting her home, he lured her to an abandoned warehouse, where he assaulted her. Afterward, Miyano called Minato and bragged about his actions. Soon, two other classmates, Joe Ogura and Yasushi Watanabe, joined them. These boys, who were part of a gang, had a history of criminal behavior. Together, they decided to hold Junko captive for their own gratification. By the early hours of November 26th, Junko was taken to Minato's home. They manipulated her into calling her parents, claiming she had run away but was safe. To avoid suspicion, the boys made her act as Minato's girlfriend whenever his parents were around. However, Minato's parents soon realized what was happening, but chose not to involve the police, fearing retaliation from the criminal group the boys were affiliated with. For the next 40 days, Junko endured unimaginable suffering. She was assaulted, beaten, and tortured daily. The boys invited others to participate, with nearly 100 people reportedly involved over the weeks. Junko was subjected to cruel treatment, including being burned, forced to ingest harmful substances, and exposed to extreme cold. Despite her worsening condition, her captors showed no mercy. Junko's physical injuries were severe. Her body was covered in burns and bruises, Her brain was affected by repeated trauma and she was unable to move or speak coherently. At one point, she managed to contact the police, but before she could explain her situation, she was caught and punished harshly. Her captors ignored her pleas for the suffering to end and continued their abuse. By early January 1989, Junko was on the brink of death. Her injuries were so severe that her body began to decompose while she was still alive. Her captors, growing bored and angry, eventually decided to end her life in one final act of violence. On January 4th, Miyano poured lighter fluid on her and set her on fire. Too weak to defend herself, Junko succumbed to her injuries. Her body was placed in a 55-gallon drum filled with cement and disposed of in Koto, Tokyo. The crime came to light when Miyano and Ogura were arrested later that month for a separate crime. During questioning, Miyano revealed the location of Junko's body. Police recovered her remains and the suspects were arrested. However, the legal outcome shocked many. The boys were not charged with homicide, but with bodily injury resulting in death due to their status as minors. This led to lenient sentences. Miyano received 20 years, while the others served between 5 to 9 years. These sentences sparked public outrage. After serving their sentences, the perpetrators continued their criminal behavior. Miyano became involved in fraud, and others were arrested for various offenses in later years. The injustice of Junko's case led to debates in Japan about juvenile law and changes to the age of criminal responsibility. Junko Furuta's story is a heartbreaking account of cruelty and a reflection of systemic failures. It left a lasting impact on her family, who fought for justice even after her death. While reforms have been made, questions remain about whether true justice was ever achieved. It was October 20th, 2007 in New Delhi, India. Surinder Singh Bajwa, the 52-year-old deputy mayor of Delhi, was spending a quiet evening at home. Bajwa had been elected to his position in April, just months earlier. As a senior member of the Bharatiya Janata Party, or BJP, he was already a well-known figure in the local political scene. But that night, an unexpected event would change everything. Outside Bajwa's home, a group of rhesus macaques, a type of monkey known for being aggressive and territorial, entered the property. These monkeys were a growing problem in New Delhi, where urban development had disrupted their natural habitats. It wasn't uncommon for them to raid homes, steal food, or even confront people. But no one expected an incident this severe. Reports suggested that Bajwa noticed the monkeys and tried to scare them off. In his attempt to protect his home, he ended up on his balcony. What happened next was unclear, but it was believed that the monkey's aggressive behavior startled Bajwa, causing him to lose his balance and fall from the first-floor terrace. He suffered serious head injuries from the fall. Neighbors were horrified. Though the monkey problem was well known, no one had imagined it could lead to such a tragedy. Emergency services were called, and Bajwa was rushed to Indraprastha Apollo Hospital. Despite the doctor's efforts, his injuries were too severe, and he passed away the next day, October 21, 2007. Bajwa's death shocked the city. He was a dedicated public servant, a husband, and a father. His family was devastated by the sudden loss, and the community mourned the tragedy. His death also brought national attention to Delhi's long-standing monkey problem, an issue that had been neglected for years despite repeated complaints. In New Delhi, rhesus macaques had become a part of everyday life. They frequently invaded homes, damaged property, and even injured people. Children and pedestrians were particularly vulnerable to their aggressive behavior. The city's rapid urbanization had displaced the monkeys from their natural habitats, forcing them to adapt to urban areas where food and shelter were abundant. Local authorities had tried various methods to control the monkey population, but none had worked effectively. One approach involved using langurs, a larger species of monkey, to scare away the rhesus macaques. However, this solution created problems. Langurs were difficult to manage, and employing them was illegal. Some handlers lost their jobs, and the monkey issue persisted. In some cases, even government offices had been overrun by monkeys, with reports of sensitive documents being scattered by them. Bajwa's family and neighbors had dealt with monkey invasions before, but they hadn't imagined the problem would turn deadly. His death highlighted the authorities' inability to address the issue despite court orders demanding action. The problem had become so severe that a lawsuit had been filed against the government for its failure to act. The public response to Bajwa's death was a mix of grief and anger. While many offered condolences to his family, others criticized the government for ignoring a growing safety threat. Political leaders visited Bajwa's home to pay their respects, but frustration among residents was clear. Many demanded immediate action to prevent further incidents. One challenge in solving the monkey problem was the cultural and religious significance of these animals in India. Monkeys are considered sacred by many and are associated with the Hindu god Hanuman. Feeding monkeys is a common practice, which further encouraged their presence in urban areas. Efforts to remove or relocate the animals often face resistance from local communities. Following Bajwa's death, the Delhi Municipal Corporation, or MCD, announced plans to hire more monkey catchers and implement stricter measures to control the monkey population. However, many felt these actions were too late. The tragedy has been a grim reminder of the dangers posed by wildlife in urban areas and the need for a long-term solution. Bajwa's fall wasn't the first serious incident involving monkeys, but it was among the most high-profile. Over the years, monkeys have injured residents, damaged property, and disrupted daily life in the city. In one case, even the Defense Ministry had to deal with monkeys tampering with important documents. The issue wasn't just a nuisance. It had become a security and safety concern for Delhi. Bajwa's death underscored the urgent need for better wildlife management in the rapidly growing city. While efforts to address the problem continued, his passing remained a tragic reminder of what happens when urban development and nature collide without proper planning. 1999 in Hong Kong. Fan Man Yi, a 23-year-old woman, lived in a small apartment in the Fu Yu section of Lai Yu estate. Her life had been filled with challenges. Raised in an orphanage after being abandoned, she grew up in neglect and hardship. As a teen, she struggled with substance abuse and was forced into a difficult life to survive. By her early 20s, Fan had turned her life around, leaving behind an abusive marriage, overcoming addiction, and finding work as a nightclub hostess. She was determined to build a better life for her young son. However, Fan's efforts were derailed by a mistake that put her in danger. She took a wallet belonging to Chan Man Lok, a member of a local gang. The wallet contained about 4,000 Hong Kong dollars, or about $500 US. Though Fan returned the stolen money, Chan demanded more than 10,000 Hong Kong dollars, which she could not provide. On March 17th, Chan and two associates, Leung Shing Cho and Leung Wai Lun, came to her apartment. They kidnapped her and brought her to an apartment in the Tsim Sha Tsui district. What followed was a month of unimaginable cruelty. Initially, her captors intended to punish her by forcing her into exploitation, but their treatment soon became more brutal. They subjected Fan to constant physical abuse, using metal rods, kitchen tools, and other objects. She was beaten, suspended by her wrists, burned with melted plastic, and had irritants rubbed into her wounds. The torment extended to degrading acts meant to strip her of her dignity and spirit. A chilling part of this story involved a 14-year-old girl named Ah Fong, who was associated with Chan. She witnessed the abuse and even participated in it, later claiming she did so for amusement. She recalled seeing Fan kicked repeatedly and admitted to joining in the attacks. Fan endured weeks of relentless abuse, which took a severe toll on her physical and emotional well-being. By mid-April, she succumbed to her injuries. Her captors claimed she had died from a substance overdose, but evidence suggested otherwise. It was likely the prolonged abuse that led to her death. What happened after Fan's death was equally horrifying. The men attempted to cover their tracks by dismembering her body and boiling the remains to slow decomposition. Her body parts were discarded as trash, but her skull was placed inside a large Hello Kitty mermaid doll. This grotesque act turned a symbol of innocence into a chilling artifact of the crime. The case came to light when Ah Fong went to the police in May 1999. She claimed she was haunted by Fan's spirit, which she said followed her and tormented her with visions of what had occurred. Although her story seemed unbelievable, authorities investigated. Ah Fong led them to the apartment where the crime occurred, and what they found confirmed her account. Inside the apartment, police discovered the Hello Kitty doll containing Fan's skull. They also uncovered more evidence of the crime, including items linked to the abuse. The three men, Chan Man Lok, Leung Shing Cho, and Leung Wai Lun, were arrested. In exchange for her testimony, Ah Fong was granted immunity. The trial began in 2000 and revealed details so shocking that many struggled to comprehend the level of cruelty involved. The men denied causing Fan's death, though they admitted to abducting and torturing her. Due to the state of Fan's remains, medical examiners could not determine an exact cause of death. However, the court concluded that the abuse had caused her death, even if it was not their direct intention. The men were convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to life imprisonment. One of them, Leung Shing Cho, successfully appealed and had his sentence reduced to 18 years, serving just 12 years before his release in 2011. The apartment where the crime occurred became infamous, believed by many to be haunted. It remained vacant for years before being demolished in 2012. In 2022, Leung made headlines again when he was convicted of harming a child, cementing his reputation as a dangerous individual. The case, dubbed the Hello Kitty murder, remains one of Hong Kong's most disturbing crimes. It is a grim reminder of the darkness beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary lives. To this day, the details of the case continue to haunt those who hear it.